When working on a project with a group, whether that project be coding or something else such as writing an essay, it's very necessary to find a way to collaborate effectively. So let's go ahead and pretend that you're writing an essay in a group assignment for school. And everyone lives at a different place, a different house. So you could come together and you could all work on the essay together, but let's say you have a few weeks to complete the essay and everyone has different parts of the essay that they're working on. It doesn't always make sense to meet up. Sometimes it's nice to work asynchronously and you work on your piece while someone else works on their piece at whatever time, wherever they're at. You don't have to be together to work on it. So in order to do that, you need some kind of technology. You're obviously not going to mail the essay back and forth, right? That can be very difficult. So let's say the first thing you come up with is using a thumb drive or a CD, and you can put the essay on the thumb drive. And then you can work on it and you can pass it around. Now, that would work, except for it's not asynchronous, right? Only one person can be working on it at a time. And that can introduce some difficulties. So if we fast forward a little bit, you could have something like Dropbox. Now, with Dropbox, you're all able to upload it to the cloud on Dropbox and work on it from wherever you're at any time, and that could be asynchronous. But let's think about something for a minute. Let's say you decide on Saturday evening that you're going to pull down your essay and start working on your part. So you've got the essay checked out right then. So you're working on the essay. Then, while you're working on it, someone else grabs it from Dropbox as well. So if someone else starts working while you're still working, then they don't have your changes, right? So let's say you go ahead and save your changes to Dropbox. You save your changes to Dropbox, and then they still have the version that they were working on, right? That doesn't have any of your changes. Then they go ahead and save their version after you. What happens to the changes that you put there? Well, those changes are then overwritten by their changes. That's because Dropbox isn't made, or anything like Dropbox, it's not made for that type of collaboration. Only one person can really be working on a file at a time because it's not taking into account the different people working on the files. So with this being said, if you can imagine in programming, coders or software developers are working on files all the time. These files contain the code that they're writing, and sometimes they're working on the same file to make changes. With that being said, there's a need for a collaborative environment that allows people to work simultaneously on the same file and on the same code without overwriting one another's changes. Because if you're overwriting one another's changes, that will introduce a lot of difficulties into the development process and environment. So with that being said, there's a need for collaborative working tools. So one of the tools in the industry that's the most popular in the industry is called Git. And Git allows us to work in that collaborative manner that I was talking about so that different developers can be working at the same time on files, on the same files, and then they can commit their changes and push their changes, and if there are any types of issues, like if someone wrote something different on the same line as a different developer, then Git will try to resolve that merge conflict automatically. If it can't, then the developer can look at the merge conflict, and Git will allow you to see both pieces of what the two different developers have committed, and then decide, oh, maybe they just go one line apart, or maybe one of them does need to be overwritten. So it allows you to work collaboratively, which is very, very useful in software development. And what this does, Git allows you to create a remote repository, and then everyone who's working on this code base can create a copy of that repository on their local computer. So the remote repository is in the cloud, and every developer's copy is on their computer. And what this does is it also implicitly adds backups. So that's not the intended use, but just in case the remote repository goes down, everyone else has a copy of it, and so it adds a redundant backup to your code base, which is very nice. So we're going to talk about the Git workflow really quick. The Git workflow, like I said, we have a repository that's in the cloud, and then I create my own copy, and I work on that copy, and then I push my changes back to the repository that's in the cloud. And this will make a little more sense once we start doing it, but for now we're going to go over it theoretically, how the workflow works. So the first thing that we do, and this is our Git workflow, we're going to pull down changes so your workspace is up to date. And what that means is if everyone's pushing changes to the remote repository and you're working on it, you need to make sure that before you start making more changes in the morning, you pull down everybody else's changes so your code is up to date as possible. Then you're going to make your changes. After that, you need to stage your changes. Now this is like if you're a photographer and you're taking a picture of something, you get everything set up first, so you're staging it so that it's ready to take a picture of, and then you can take a snapshot of those of that scene. And that's what we do here, is you take a snapshot of the changes. Now once you have that snapshot created, and that's called a commit, which we'll talk about in more depth later, you can push those changes to a remote branch. And that remote branch is going to be on that repository that I mentioned is in the cloud, so that your changes are back up in the cloud. After you're done with that, you can merge that branch into the master branch. So we're going to talk about branches more in depth later, but the branches are different segments of the code repository, and then the master branch is the main one. That's the I don't want to say most updated, but that's the almost the real or the de facto branch, and that's the production ready code. So you push to other branches to test it, and then when it's all tested, you can merge back into master and say this is ready to go and be deployed to production where customers can actually see the product. So we're going to go ahead and get you set up for Git. So to do this, we need to install something called Git, which is what we're talking about right now. So to do that, we can go ahead and say, go to Google and type in install Git, and this will come up. So you want to go to this download page, and you want to find the one that's appropriate for your operating system. So if you go to Windows, right here it says your download is starting. Once that's done, I've already got mine downloaded, so I'm not going to. Once it's done, click on it and install Git, and go through just the default options for the installation process. Once that's installed, you can go ahead and open your command prompt and do git -v, or sorry, git -v. Sorry, it's different for every program. For Git, it's --version, and you can see the version of Git that has been downloaded. Then, what we want to do is we want to go to GitHub. What GitHub is a website. It's a graphical representation of our Git repositories. So you want to go here and you want to create an account. So sign up for an account on GitHub, go through, verify the account with your email and everything, and this is where we're going to push all of our remote repositories to so that we can collaborate. This will allow us to access our code from anywhere, from any computer. It will also allow us to work with the team so that we can all access the code as described before. So once you have your repository created, or once you have your GitHub account created, you can come here and you can create a new repository. There's a few ways to do that. You can hit the plus up here, hit new repository. If you're on this page, you can click new repository. But once you start that, you click new repository, and then you'll create the repository name. So I'm going to call this my test repository. So there we go. You can add a description. You want to choose public. Anyone can see this, and that's okay. But private, you have to pay for. So we're going to go ahead and create the repository. Once that's created, you're going to see some steps here. So you can create a new repository on your command line, or you can push an existing repository if you have one locally, or you can import code from somewhere else. We're going to be following these steps right here not fully, but some of them. So what we're going to do once we have that created is let's go ahead and create a repository. So I'm going to create a directory called projects, and then I'm going to cd into projects. From here, it's a new empty directory. I'm going to create a directory for the project that I'm going to push to this repository. So I'll call this my, let's see, yeah, we'll call this my test repository. It'll match that. And then I'm going to follow the commands here. So it says we can echo into this README. This will create a README, so you can copy and paste that here. This will create, I don't think I got it copied. This will create a README file. So if I do a dir, we can see that it created this README. And actually I created it in projects. I needed to create that in test repository. So I'm going to go ahead and move that into my test repository. And then cd into test repository where I want to do my work, verify that it's moved there, we're good. So now I'm going to go ahead and follow these commands. So git init. Git init will initialize this as a repository. So this is now a repository. You can see that it says created an empty repository in this area. Then we're going to go ahead and run our git add. Now we can do readme, which is the folder we created. This is the staging process. This is where we're staging it, and we're going to take a snapshot after this. So we have to add the new files. I'm going to just do git add dot instead of the actual file. Dot will add all files that we have created. So we've got that. And then I can run a git status to see what's going on. And so it shows that I've got a new file that's ready to be committed. Before I did the git add dot, it would show that I had a new file, but it would be red, and it would say that it needs to be staged before it can be committed. So now that it's ready to be committed, I can say git commit dash, I like to do am, and then we're going to say this will be our first commit. This is the first commit we're making for this repository project. Git status, we can see that now it says that we have nothing to commit because it's all already committed. Then we need to copy this long line. What this line is going to do is it points our local repository, which is what I'm working with right here, to our remote repository, which is what we just created on GitHub. So we're going to paste this in here. Let's copy it first. Paste, enter. And then the last thing we need to do is push it to master. So git push origin, you can omit the U, the dash U if you want to, master. So now we can see that it's pushing, it's loading what we have there. And once that's finished, we can come in here and refresh, and we can see the file that we created exists in master. So if I want to create another file in there, I can just go to, let's go in here on the graphical side, exactly where I created that. Go into projects, wherever that is. There's my test report. So here we go. This git.git, if you can see it, that's a hidden file, full directory, and that has all the information related to our repository. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file in here. My new file. And I'll come in here and add some text. Save that, exit out of it. Now if I come back in here, I run a git status. There's the red. I've got a new file in here. I can do dir to see that file, right? Git status shows that I have the file, and it needs to be added. It even says use git add file to include it in what will be committed. So I'll do a git add. I'm going to do dot again because that adds all files, which is useful. Another git status, and I can see it's ready to be committed. So I can do a git commit -am and then add a message. What did I do in this commit? Well, I added my new file. The commit is like a save point in time. So the more you commit, the more save points you have, and you can roll back to one if you need to, if anything went wrong. Then now that it's committed, I can do a git push origin master, and that's pushing it to the master branch. I can refresh this, and I can see that I've got my file there now. So that's how I can upload everything to there. Now remember, if you're working with multiple people, you always want to pull before you start making changes. So that would be a git pull. And here it'll say I'm already up to date because I already have everything. But if you're working with people, you always want to make sure you pull. and then you want to push it to a different branch before you merge into master, and we'll discuss that a little more in depth later. For now, also know that Git allows versioning as well as source control, so it does more than just source control, but the most important feature of Git is the source control.